The lights indeed are all still on here at the 76ers training complex in Camden, New Jersey, both internally and from what we have also heard externally as well. The media hard at work. The 76ers continue to do business up there in the boardroom as they focus now on the second round, where they have currently 4 picks at number 36, 39, 46, and 50. We're back again on our Sixers Draft live stream. This is Tom McGinnis. I'm Brian Seltzer. Had a few moments to inhale, refresh, recharge, but still very much excited about the events from earlier tonight. Number 1 pick, Markelle Fultz, a 76er, Bryan Colangelo, Brett Brown, really, in so many words, saying that he was the perfect fit.
Absolutely, both effusive in their praise for Markelle, both as a person and his abilities on the basketball court. In summation, Bryan Colangelo saying he's really a combo guard. There's been so much talk about can he handle the ball, or Simmons, who's going to be the point guard, but really saying that Markelle can play either with the ball as a lead guard or as an off guard. And Brett Brown talking about adding Markelle to the fold with really the talent, overall talent, obviously being increased. And Fultz has been, you know, it's the culmination of a dream come true for him and so many of these players tonight. 30 have been selected, and obviously he's very, very tickled, and we'll find out more from him more than likely tomorrow. But he's been great in his post-draft comments at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn.
First round clocks in at about a total length of time of 150 minutes. Each of the 30 picks take 5 minutes in length. In the second round, things go a little bit more quickly, 2 minutes per pick. And again, the Sixers have 4 of them. We talked about the excitement being felt here inside the Sixers training complex. Well, how about at the Sixers draft party in the 19123 Northern Liberties at Schmitz Commons at the Piazza? Check this out.
With the first pick in the 2017 NBA Draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Markelle Fultz.
Not a bad look at Schmitz Commons at the Piazza. Such a great turnout.
Right, we're right here in the nexus, if you will, of the Sixers draft, and that's right out there in the public, if you will. What an atmosphere! What a festive party that is. That's obviously a great reaction shot from the hundreds and hundreds of people in Northern Liberties.
What was the reaction from Markelle Fultz up at Barclays Center in Brooklyn? Here was the footage from ESPN when the number 1 moment went down.
With the first pick in the 2017 NBA Draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Markelle Fultz from the University of Washington.
The moment for Markelle Fultz, who was on the junior varsity at DeMatha Catholic until his junior season in high school. An avid BMX biker, and now he loves to throw caution to the wind, and now he's going to have to be daring enough to try to lift the 76ers into a winning culture. What are the Sixers getting from Fultz, Jay?
Well, they're getting a guy who's got an NBA frame already. He's got great length, and he's
Obviously a moment that you could tell Markelle Fultz just So appreciative of and soaking it in. Had a nice hug and kiss for his mom, Ebony, who was here at the Sixers training complex with Markelle last Saturday. Lorenzo Romar, former coach at Washington, was here. And you see that cap get put on, the handshake with Adam Silver. It just becomes that much more concrete and real.
No, it's cool. I mean, we had earlier tonight Nick Stauskas relive the moment that he walked on that stage. And, you know, like, as players, they talk about winning a ring. And it's really the championship experience, but it gets narrowed down, if you will, boiled down to winning a ring. Well, as a player, the dream is to be drafted into the NBA, but really, like I said, if you dive into it, they're talking about walking on that stage with the hat on of the team that just drafted him, shaking the hand of the commissioner, and consummating that goal that they've had. In many cases, they've harbored internally, and to be able to fulfill that, and obviously for Markelle, a dream come true tonight in Brooklyn.
So the Adam Silver portion of the night is over at Barclays Center in Brooklyn at the draft. It is now shifted to Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum as the second round is underway. One pick has already been made, and an intriguing name, Frank Jackson. He was at the Combine, had one season at Duke, and on the second day of the Combine, after a really nice showing on the first day, he declared his intent to go pro. So the Sixers will be up on the clock at number 36. And just a disclaimer and reminder at this point in time, because we are an NBA property here, we are not able to confirm anything until it is 100% absolutely official. So just to put that out there as far as how things go. Real quickly, Tom, before we dive into some subjects about the second round. First round, there were some moves that were made. The Portland Trail Blazers making a trade with the Sacramento Kings involving Zach Collins, and really the big one, the Chicago Bulls and the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Absolutely, with Jimmy Butler going from the Bulls to the Wolves, and they got Patton, I believe, the young player from Creighton, is also going to be playing in Minneapolis for Tom Thibodeau, and Scott Layden getting involved there with Coach Thibodeau in terms of making a move. And then for Chicago, they get Dunn. Zach LaVine, as we said earlier, is coming off a knee injury, and they get Markelle, who's a talented player who can really shoot from afar, played at Arizona. So they get three young, talented players. And Gar Forman and John Paxson making the move, trading Jimmy Butler. And that's a major shift for the Bulls. And, you know, it's hard to say what goes in, but just from the surface, Jimmy Butler, all-star player, one of the best offensive players, one of the best two-way players in the NBA, and yet his name has been bandied about for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about trying to acquire franchise-type players. Wouldn't Jimmy Butler qualify? And he's traded away. So sometimes you really don't know the whole scenario, what goes on behind the scenes. Obviously, there was, again, it was reported, I just said, you don't know, but like some disconnect between their stars in Wade and Rondo, Butler and Hoiberg. They had a bit of a swoon, but Jimmy Butler came in here to Philadelphia, not this past season, but 2 years ago, 53 points. So going back to Thibodeau, you know, Minnesota, you talk about adding a veteran presence to that group with Towns and Wiggins, and now you bring Jimmy Butler into the fold. I look for them to make a major jump, and for the Bulls, they feel, like I said, they get three major, you know, acquisitions in terms of young players. They'll probably have to wait on Zach LaVine a little bit, but they're trying to, you know, go from this era, the Derrick Rose and Noah, you know, last year, and now Jimmy Butler. It's going to be a different team for them. And just to close out, there were so many young players. I believe it's the first time that the top three players were all just one-year college players. I think I heard that earlier. And then at the end of the draft, just now, the 30th pick, Josh Hart from Villanova, drafted by Utah but going to the Lakers. And I believe I just heard where he was only the second four-year player taken in the first round. And Bryan, you interviewed Josh, and I had a chance to visit with him after his workout here. Just a quality guy, and you couldn't be happier for him. Kind of wished kind of selfishly that he was around for the Sixers, but great for him, especially that's again key to be a first round selection monetarily. That'll really set up Josh early in his career. He's a great defensive player, and going to the Lakers as they're getting some exciting pieces together with Ingram and obviously Ball and adding Lopez. It'll be interesting to see how he fares in LA.
The second pick from the second round is in for the Phoenix Suns. They take Devon Reed out of Miami, a player who was scheduled to work out with the Sixers. It was either Monday or Saturday, but he might have come up a little bit lame during some pre-workout exercises, so he wasn't able to take the floor. The 76ers first pick in the second round is number 34. So now we can kind of shift the conversation a bit to what value you can find in the second round. And maybe almost it makes, from the Sixers standpoint, more sense to categorize it as players not drafted in the first round, because whether it's second rounders like Rashawn Holmes or undrafted prospects like Robert Covington or T.J. McConnell, there is definite value in players you can find.
Think of the whole basketball universe, okay? All the NCAA Division I players, whether 240 Division I schools, somewhere in that neighborhood.
It's over, yeah, it's like 300, yeah.
300? Okay. Then there's Division II, and I don't think too many Division III players make it. Terry Porter, Rodman, some of those players come to mind. And then the whole international, basically the rest of the world. And 60 players get drafted, so we've already had, conceivably the best 30 players taken, eligible players. And the next 30 players, think how many great basketball players, like we said, when some of the players that were working out here, you're like, and they're like one of the best players in the history of Clemson basketball, or,
right.
You know what I mean? And like, there are still some really good basketball players out there. And for whatever reason, they, fall to the second round. But, this draft used to be like 6 rounds, so, and there's some great stories. And the whole NBA draft started with Commissioner Adam Silver talking about Isaiah Thomas at 60, right. Manu Ginobili at 56, and on it, Draymond Green we've talked about. You mentioned some of the Sixers players, so, it's hard to say tonight how that'll play out for individual players taken in the second round or teams, but there's going to be some basketball played by some of these guys that are really noteworthy as we go on through the years.
Nice to see our Twitter scroll over the course of tonight's stream. The Phillies already throwing out a first pitch invitation for the first pick in this year's draft, Markelle Fultz, and something that Tom and I discussed at some point of our continuing coverage today is
explain that we've been on since 4:15.
There we go. Yes, we have been on since 4:15. Maybe it's we loosen up. Yeah, I think it's okay. We can loosen up the tie a little bit now that we're getting slightly farther along in the middle of the night. But the dynamic created by the reworked CBA, that you now can have two-way contracts on your roster, so instead of it being capped at 15, you can get up to 17 with a couple two-way players. Huge. I mean, that's really big for the G League, the Gatorade G League, which it's now been renamed, so that's something to keep in the back of your minds. But as far as who the Sixers could maybe target in the second round, and this is just kind of talking off the top of the head, there were a handful of Oregon guys that came through here. Some Michigan products have been mentioned in the second round. As you said, obviously Josh Hart is off the board, but that's what those 8 pre-draft workout groups really were all about. The 50 prospects that came in looking to see what could be there in the second round.
Well, as we said, it was easy to delineate or differentiate from the players that were in here to be potentially taken at the time for the number 3 pick. And then, like we said last Saturday when Fultz came in here, looking at the number 1 pick, and then the players who were projected or slotted in this, this phase of the draft. And there was a lot of talent, to be sure. And again, as you mentioned, with the new CBA and the 2 players that can go back and forth between the G League and the NBA, that certainly adds personnel-wise to your capabilities. But again, it's very difficult to add 4 or 5 players to your roster when you already have a lot of slots spoken for, if you will, and you want active competition. But there could be some packaging in terms of what the Sixers do in this round and the potential of doing some trades.
And keeping an ear out for something, because once again, we remind you that we cannot name certain things until they become official. But of note is that the Brooklyn Nets trade with the Los Angeles Lakers, that is official, the one involving D'Angelo Russell. And let's see, Wesley Iwundu out of Kansas State, pick number 33, going to the Orlando Magic. So the Sixers are coming up, and if you did not follow this earlier in the week, or maybe weren't a part of the live stream a couple hours ago, Bryan Colangelo very open in saying that the Sixers could expect to do some wheeling and dealing maybe with these second-round picks. Their hope was to maybe get back into the first round, or just maybe sell off some of these picks, because there's only so much you can do with 4 of them. Maybe you draft and stash like what the Sixers did with Furkan Korkmaz last year.
Well, that's right. That's what I was talking about, packaging, kind of saying the same thing. But speaking of Furkan, the young 19-year-old player who's playing in Turkey, Brett Brown, he was just here for 8 days, and they loved him. They were really high on him. He's a young player, a wing player with great size, still trying to build up his body a little bit. I believe weighs 190 pounds, but it's a perfect example, not unlike that of Dario Saric, who the Sixers were, you know, pretty much under this understanding that he too was going to play in Turkey, and he did for 2 years. And that is, like you say, that's certainly a common play, if you will, at this point in the draft. And there's been some great players, looking at Ginobili and others, that have come over after playing in Europe and made major contributions to winning championship-type teams.
Sure, the goal is to try and find that Draymond Green somewhere out there that could help lift your club over the top. Malcolm Brogdon for the Bucks had a great year out of the second round. So as the Sixers try to shape what they'd like to do with their second-round picks, we think of, you know, guys like Rashawn Holmes, who fared very well, and he was someone who, as we talked to him, kind of came out of relative obscurity. But the amazing thing is that for people that really watch college basketball, you start to see some of those more recognizable names in the second round. I mean, a guy like Frank Mason, the consensus National Player of the Year, could very well be a second-round pick. So sometimes, yeah, do you reach and take projects? Sure. Do you maybe go for a veteran leader type who is grounded in the game and knows more what he's doing? That's another type of option too. But trying to think back over the workouts that the Sixers had, it was fun to watch a handful of these guys, just see how they jumped out. I'm going to say Thomas Bryant from Indiana, with a big man who had a lot of energy. And again, some of the Oregon guys, whether it's Jordan Bell, Tyler Dorsey, Dylan Ennis, Dylan Brooks, these are guys that played winning basketball at the college level, who are looking
Jefferson
to, yes, absolutely.
Sixers seem pretty well stocked, if you will, in the front line, the front court, but those are another player. One thing that I think happens more from the player agent side later in this round is that, you know, if you get drafted by a team, you're obviously going to go play for them in the summer and in camp. Sometimes guys want to not get picked so they can kind of sort through their offers, as we talked about earlier, and Brandon Williams of the Sixers staff talked about there being a third round, which is not technically a third round, but there's still a bunch of players that you might invite in. And I think there's guys that they would rather go to one scenario thinking maybe there's a better opportunity, better fit to a certain franchise than being picked by a franchise where you are expected and end up going there.
I may pass the editorial buck to you. So we're talking about Frank Mason. He was just picked in the second round. Do we roll the tape on Frank, or do we move along? We didn't really get into too much specifics about the
who picked
Sixers.
Him? Not that this is going to parlay into the answer.
Very true. He was picked by the good old Sacramento Kings.
Roll tape.
All right, let's roll tape. Frank Mason, we had the chance to talk with him earlier this week when he came in for a workout with the Sixers, the National Player of the Year. The consensus National Player of the Year for 2017 out of Kansas, Frank Mason. Frank, you're nearing the very end of this long road through the pre-draft process. How are you feeling? What do you think you accomplished?
I feel like I accomplished a lot. I had 14 workouts so far, and a few teams called me back for a second workout, so I feel like I did pretty good in that area. I feel pretty good, been taking care of my body, getting rest, putting the right things in there and getting fluids in there, and that's it. I feel pretty good.
Given the year that you had at Kansas last season, what type of momentum do you feel like you brought into the pre-draft period?
Well, I had a pretty good season this last year. I feel like I bring a lot of momentum heading into this pre-draft, with just the season I had. Didn't finish the way I wanted or we wanted as a team, but, learned a lot throughout the season, and it's been a fun process so far.
Your game right now with where it's at, what do you feel best about? What do you think might be the most NBA-ready aspect of your skill set?
Just my toughness, how athletic I am, my confidence, and, how much of a team player I am.
You obviously played with a ton of great talent over the course of 4 years. What was it like? Let's go back to your freshman year, coming in with Joel Embiid, Andrew Wiggins. What are your biggest memories from that first year?
Just being around Joel. He's a funny guy. He's always joking and playing around, so it's good memories being around him. But I think that team was pretty special. We had a lot of really good athletes, and most of them went on to play in the NBA, and if not in the NBA, overseas, and had pretty good careers. So it was a special season as a freshman with those guys.
Did you stay in touch with Joel much over the years, track what he was going through, and then we saw so much promise from him this past season?
Yeah, for sure. Played 31 games, really special. You can see his potential and what he's capable of if he was out there playing 82 games or more. So I think it's only the best from here, from JoJo, long as he stay healthy, and I just wish him the best.
What's it like being a player in a program where the talent that comes in, like yourself, is at such a high level? How does that advance your own development, do you feel?
Well, just playing under Coach Self for 4 years, he challenged you and just makes you better on and off the court. And I feel like if you can play there, then then you obviously will get better over the years. And just the tradition there is great. So I feel like if you can make it through that, then you obviously will get better over the years.
You mentioned your toughness. The Sixers front office has referenced that as well. Where does that come from?
It's just who I am. It's been a part of me since I started playing basketball, and it's only got tougher since I started to get older.
We've got one more workout to go. What are your hopes? What are your expectations for draft night?
Just to get back with the family, have a good time, and just watch the draft. Excited to see how it goes, and just be around my son, and just enjoy the night.
All right, Frank, thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
'76ers back on the clock here at their training complex in Camden, New Jersey. We look up to the second floor boardroom. Seems like there is a bustle of activity. The Sixers getting ready for pick.
Vision. How are you seeing that?
I can, see some things. There's a little. This is probably going to sound really creepy. There's a little bit of a space between the curtains and.
When you say those draft positions, now I know most combo locks, if we're still using those, only have 3 numbers, but it sounds like the key if you could get into some of your it's financial security codes. No, I mean, say it again. 35, 36,
39, 46, and 50. So Frank Mason is off the board. Ivan Rabb out of Cal. He was a double-double machine last year.
Frank Mason, after you spoke with him, he went down and visited with Joel Embiid, right?
Right.
Joe was looking to talk to him. That was pretty neat. So he got picked right as we were airing that interview that Bryan did with him. So he's with the Kings, and they also had a De'Aaron Fox.
Yes.
Right?
So they've had a stockpile of picks.
Right.
Now for the Sixers, based on what some experts and analysts say, one of the best available players left is Ike Anibogu from the UCLA Bruins, a part of a really talented team that Lonzo Ball and TJ Leaf were a part of last year. Lonzo Ball, of course, going to the Los Angeles Lakers. But the Sixers, we've seen that they have in recent years capitalized on non-first round talents. The other thing is, we were talking about this earlier, like Bryan Colangelo has shown no hesitation about dipping overseas and mining the talent that is over in that part of the
getting players
world.
in the international realm.
Yeah.
Over the years.
As we looked at a guy like Timothy Cabrera, of course, he was a first-round pick last year. But the Sixers got a lot of calls in recent days about what to do with the second-rounders. Would they want to sell it off? Would they like to keep it, perhaps use it for something to be packaged in the future? And we're about to find out who will join Markelle Fultz in the 2017 76ers draft class.
Here we go. Sixers.
Oh, okay. Jonah Bolden from overseas. We had a podcast guest, Emmett Ryan from ballineurope.com, and he said Jonah Bolden, that is a name to look
like
out
our
for.
local Franny Fischella.
Well, listen, it's like these prospect profiles recently. We try to get some insight on it. So
Welcome to the moment.
Let's give you a little bit more, just because we can only have so much prepared on Jonah Bolden, who is a guy who was over at UCLA.
Put your laptop on the desk.
We'll do this.
Onto the floor.
Here it is.
Move your little coffee mug.
The secrets to our success tonight.
That's good.
So
That's
Bolden,
allowed.
he had some time at UCLA, and then I believe he went overseas last year, and he's a guy who has had some experience here, went overseas, got to play against men.
Describe his size and the style of play and numbers like that.
Of course. Let's get to some of them. He is probably a tweener, 6'9"-ish, 230, so some height, but some lankiness maybe.
Tweener, 3'4", 4'5"?
Yeah, probably, yeah. 3'4".
To the talent evaluator.
Right, you know, as I go to my cheat sheet, as we try to give you a little bit more.
Where did he play last year?
Go, he was over in, if I'm not mistaken, in the Adriatic League last year, and right around 12.5 points per game. But he was someone that our guy Emmett Ryan, if you go to soundcloud.com/Sixers, find the episode where we talked about some international prospects, and he certainly will give you a little bit more of a in-depth profile than what we have just been able to provide right there. But once again, an international prospect.
Right.
And the one thing we hear about is, and this is something that Dario Saric spoke about last year, was how much you can accelerate your development when you play against grown men.
Oh, no doubt about it. And that, hey, after all, that's what this league's all about, even for these young players. Like, you're going up against 28-year-old guys, Chris Paul, LeBron, Carmelo. They have experience. Their bodies have developed. With that experience, obviously, is the know-how, and there's an adjustment, that's for sure. And hopefully our guys gain that experience and traction as quickly as they can. But there's no doubt that there's things that you have to learn. There's just being a pro. You have a lot of hard workers, but as Rashawn Holmes told us earlier this evening, once you go through it, the travel, taking care of your body, all of the things that are requisite with being a professional player at this level, it makes it so much easier that second year. Like, we talk about international players, and I'm really excited for Timothy Cabrera.
Right.
Just, the guy couldn't get a call to save his life. And, those last few weeks of the season were, really helpful for him because of what you just said, and that is getting an opportunity, getting NBA minutes, and to play against some of these older players, albeit at the end of the season. And I think he's going to grow by leaps and bounds as a part of that.
Bolden, originally from, and who knows, maybe this isn't too much of a coincidence, Melbourne, Australia, a continent and part of the world where the head coach of the Sixers certainly has a lot of familiarity there.
I'm sure he still has some contacts down there.
That's right.
Sure, right.
So Bolden, he played 31 games for UCLA as a true sophomore and then went back overseas last year in the Adriatic League, and that was in the same league, if I'm not mistaken, don't want to totally go out of the wheelhouse and comfort zone here, that Luau Cabarro actually played in with Megalex last year. Another name coming in, the Boston Celtics taking Semi Ojeleye out of SMU, who had a really neat story. He was at Duke, was there for 2 years, then transferred to SMU, and he was the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year. He was one of the first players to work out for the Sixers, and now the Bulls are up at number 38, and then the Sixers will follow at 39, so we'll keep it here and remain in tune to what is going on. So 2 picks in, and yeah, maybe Bolden's a little bit of a project, but you know, it's amazing, like how things shook out at the end of the year. The wing spot was actually kind of an area where the Sixers were thinking, like, once Covington went down, there wasn't much there.
No, right, and just definitely, that's the type of position, especially in this league, where you need multiple players because the wing players are so unbelievably gifted. And to me, anytime you can get a player like Covington, or anybody that you can put in front of a guy and know you have a pretty, not that you're going to stop some of these gifted players on the perimeter, but that you can hold your own and not be completely overmatched. So the more guys that can guard at those spots, I think the better it for your roster and for your ball club.
There was another talent out of Australia, well actually he's from the United States, but played in Australia last year, Terrence Ferguson, who was taken in the first round by the Thunder at 21 overall, but that was another name remembering from the Combine who might be out there. So the Chicago Bulls, they certainly have been a team that has kind of highlighted draft night tonight in terms of surprises, with Jimmy Butler being on the move, and
it's a chance to remake your team.
Yeah,
like we said, has been talked about, but to draft, to trade, and acquire free agents. I mean, tonight's a big night. This is when deals are done, and then to infuse your roster with new talent. And again, the Bulls have made that decision. I remember, Brian, I guess our last game was in New York, right? But I think we played, was it this year? I mean, it all blends together, but I think we played the Bulls' last home game. Was that this year? And Gar and John Paxson were doing a press conference.
Yes, I think you are correct.
So, yeah, it was right, well, it was March 30th.
Yes.
Maybe
no, we were in Chicago when there was a big press conference.
That must
maybe
have been 2 years ago, because they wouldn't have played their last game 13 days. But the point is, went into the press room, and it was a disappointing season. And, having been around John Paxson a little bit over the years, and to see him literally on the hot seat in front of the Chicago media, and the Bulls, of course, had won 6 championships and had a really good run with Derrick Rose, save for the injuries. And it was tough to watch when you're in this business and, you see people you respect and having to respond. I was like tipping-toeing out of the press conference because they were feeling a little heat right there. Well, my whole point is now they're flipping things around in Chicago and they're rebuilding and going in a different direction.
We are waiting on some Jonah Bolden highlights, so as soon as they are ready, we will distribute them and send them your way. The Chicago Bulls believe their pick is in, and we will reveal that to you in just a matter of moments. And then the 76ers are on the clock, and then after the Sixers make their pick, we'll play you back some of the interviews and conversations and media availabilities we had with some potential second rounders before the night is done.
Would it be sensible to say that Ben Simmons might have a familiarity with Bolden, having played in Australia?
That is a good question. You would think that they probably grew up on the same circuit. It did not check Bolden's age. He is 21. Juwan Evans, all right, the picks are in. So things moved along very quickly. Juwan Evans, picked by the Sixers at 39 overall. We're maybe a little bit slow on the uptake with the good old updating of the second draft tracker here. And these are chances for guys to begin to prove themselves a little bit more and gain more traction as the Sixers flush out their stockpile of picks in the second round.
So Bolden and Evans. What do we know about Jawan Evans?
Well, we were going to effort that right now. This is what happens when you let
fill a little bit more.
The stream goes after dark. But I'll tell you, it's this is where, like, you know, the scouting staff, you talk about those guys who are out and traversing the country over the course of the year. This is where it's like that work pays off, and you're trying to, you know, schedule your visits. And, you know, sometimes as a guy, you may go into a game where, you know, you're not even really counting on seeing someone.
Oh, that's,
and
I know
someone
that's happened in college recruiting quite a bit. There's dozens of stories where a college recruiter went to go watch a player and came away really impressed with another player, and that player ends up getting a scholarship to that specific school. And, you know, these scouts that, if you want to say discover a guy, they're selling that player to, you know, to their bosses, to the general manager, to the president of basketball operations, and, you know, then, all right, show me your work, and you show the player, and, you know, and I'm sure that happens quite a bit also, where, you know, you think you found somebody that might be a fit and might have a chance to play, and then you kind of have to, like I say, sell your beliefs about a particular player. I'm sure that happens quite a bit.
Evans out of Oklahoma State, at one point, if I'm not mistaken, trying to rack the brain, was towards the back end of the first round on some mock projections. So that's the other neat thing about tracking this. You get to figure out, like, how real are some of the projections.
Well, we're talking about some of these international players, and one thing here tonight, we're missing the expert commentary of Fran Fraschilla, who really knows the international game. And then, of course, Jay Billis is a part of the coverage on ESPN tonight, and he's just, you know, it's just, you can learn about basketball listening to somebody like Billis describe some of these players' assets and strengths. But it's neat. There's just, it's become so big, you know, the draft. I don't know, did you see that 30 for 30 with the 84 draft?
No.
It was one of the greatest draft classes ever, with Barkley and Jordan and Stockton and the like, Hakeem Olajuwon. And it's just, it's amazing. You know, we had the NFL draft here in Philadelphia. What a huge deal it was and is, and currently the NBA draft too. It's just, it's amazing how far these things have come. And these are all the elements that come with being one of the greatest sports leagues in the world.
All right, why don't we, as we continue to wait and find out more about where the 76ers might go in the second round, play back a conversation we had with a couple members of Oregon's program, some talent there that revealed itself over the course of this season as Oregon made its first run to the Final Four in nearly 80 years. Sitting down with two complete strangers, right? Tyler Dorsey and Jordan Bell. For you guys to have this opportunity as college teammates now to go through the same workout together, what was that like?
It was pretty good. I think having somebody like somebody you know already really relax you during the workout. I think when you're by yourself, really intense, overthinking stuff. So when you see your old teammate, kind of relax you a little bit.
It's your first one that you guys had together. How'd you find out that you'd be paired up in this one, Tyler?
I found out on Twitter and Instagram. I didn't know beforehand, but like he said, it's good to see a teammate and see how everything's going, and just going out there and competing. Just playing the game of basketball, no pressure at all, and not worrying about really anything. But it's a blessing to be in this position, and we've been working our whole lives for this. So to be here, we're not taking nothing for granted, even though it's a grind.
Obviously, you guys were at Oregon together. As we can see by your practice jerseys, you were on opposite sides during the scrimmage. But with a team as talented as the one that you guys had in Eugene, you know, I'm sure kind of a similar situation. How did the talent there, the talent that you guys had on the court today, maybe bring out the best in what you feel you might be able to do?
I think having all the talented people we had at Oregon definitely helped a lot, because every single practice, you know, you're going to have to bring your best. Competing against people like Tyler, Dylan Brooks, Dylan Ennis, Chris, even some of the freshmen, Peyton and Keith. Casey. So everybody's always bringing it every day. So I think having that intensity every single day definitely makes coming to these kind of workouts a little bit easier because you know what to bring every day.
You go through a run like you guys had in the spring, and it's so intense, and you're in the moment. But now that some time has passed, Tyler, have you guys been able to step back and reflect on what you did for the program and historically where it's put into context?
I feel like right now we're just in the moment of this draft process. So I think after it settles all down, I think we can look back at that in a couple years and really realize we made history there and we made a stamp. And I feel like we was one of the best teams that came through Oregon when we look back at it.
I'm going to ask you guys to scout each other. What would you say is Jordan's most NBA-ready skill?
He could face up in the post, and he's athletic. He'll finish on you, and he'll block your shot when you go to the rim.
Jordan, what would you say about Tyler's game, about going to the next level?
Definitely a knockdown shooter, just a pure scorer, getting to the rim, finishing through contact, knocking down threes. So just offensively, just scoring from all over the floor.
Last for a couple more warm fuzzies. What made Tyler a good teammate?
Made Tyler a good teammate. Tyler, even though he was a scorer, he definitely understood the game. So if somebody was to double him, it was a couple times, threw behind the back pass to me, and I got a lot of easy dunks. And him being such a good scorer really made my player help off a lot, so that got me a lot of easy buckets.
On the flip side, when you have a defensive anchor like that, how does that affect the dynamic for a team?
Oh, it affects it a lot, especially as guards, because sometimes we get blown by or have a bad closeout. We know we got protection at the rim, so he makes up for a lot of mistakes for us.
We'll get towards the end of this. I'll ask you both the same question, but do you feel like the success you had in the tournament, how did that affect your stock as you enter the pre-draft period, do you think?
I think we was just focused on getting to the Final Four. Everybody sacrificed for the team, really wasn't focused on our stock. We just wanted to win. And to become a good team, that's what you have to do. You got to make sacrifices. And after the season, everybody went their ways and talked to their family and decided. And everybody left.
Did you feel that more and more people started to pay attention to you guys as the year went on?
Definitely. I think as the season goes on, fewer teams are playing, so more eyes on you at once. So I think definitely as we kept winning, people started to notice how good of a team we were, how good Tyler was playing, Mr. March. So definitely think that helped our stock a lot. But like you said, we weren't thinking about that at the time. We were just trying to play our butts off, try to get to Final Four national championship game.
Last thing, best part about playing at Oregon?
Nike gear, yeah, easy. All the shoes, jerseys, warm-ups, everything we get. Uncle Phil, seeing him all the time. So definitely best part.
Same thing. Same thing, but also the fans. It was really good my last 2 years there, so the atmosphere was pretty crazy at home games.
Great stuff, guys. Thanks so much. Best of luck. A live look inside 76ers headquarters in Camden, New Jersey as the second round rolls on along. Aptly timed, that interview with Tyler Dorsey and Jordan Bell, two members of the Oregon Ducks. Hold on.
Trade was just announced.
Well, I think this confirms a move made in the first round, but just again, we are NBA property, so we will not divulge until we are particularly certain, so just hang tight for a second. But talking about Jordan Bell and Tyler Dorsey, Jordan Bell was taken right before the Sixers picked at 39 by the Chicago Bulls, and Tyler Dorsey just went off the board at 41 to the Atlanta Hawks. And
some producing. You are unbelievable.
Just try to.
That's great.
As much as the internet allows us. And Thomas Bryant, the very energetic big man, who I think stood out to the Sixers with the intensity he brought to his workout. The second week the Sixers went through their workouts, he was just snagged by the Indiana Pacers at 42 overall. The Sixers are next up at 46. And again, we are not able to confirm things until they're final, so you never know, maybe some second round picks are on the move. But just to circle back about Juwan Evans, 2 years at Oklahoma State, averaged over 9 19 points per game. But Jonah Bolden, the guy who's tall, we said 6'10", 220-some pounds, and he's got a massive wingspan, if I'm not mistaken, over 7 feet. I think maybe more like 7'1", 7'2". So, yeah, he's a guy who's gotten some reps professionally overseas and also at the college level at UCLA.
So as you say, I think there's some things in the works with the Sixers, both in this second round and also going back to the first round, awaiting confirmation. I believe it was announced, but we'll wait for the official word. The Sixers.
Yeah, so what we were looking for is a first-round pick in the mid-20s, and we just want to make sure that we get this to you not too prematurely, so we'll hang on to that. But in the mid-20s, actually smack dab middle of the 20s is the area
to go out and do a little
that
field
we're working at. Sure, we can send intrepid reporter Tom McGinnis, maybe on the move.
Find the person I'm looking for first before I...
But at this time of year, you also get to find out whether or not, you know, there's Jonah Bolden, who actually I think he's on a conference call with reporters right now. Does he come over right away? Does he play Summer League? Does he then go back overseas? But I think more and more you just see some of these success stories of guys who get that training and physical development abroad and really stand to benefit from it. But a run of Oregon players taking place recently. Dwayne Bacon, who played with Jonathan Isaac at Florida State. He was taken at 40 overall by the New Orleans Pelicans. But this kind of gets back to the point, and now curious to see what will happen for the Sixers at 46 and 50. Exactly, you know, do you keep all of these when the roster spots are not quite there? Because you would also maybe think, Tom, that with, let's say, some moves made in free agency by the Sixers, that could impact some younger players whom the Sixers had on their roster at the end of last season.
And that's something I think, you know, Bryan Colangelo is expected to address the media here following tonight's draft and potentially tomorrow as well. And that's where you get a little bit more clarity on these things. But as you say, all these things are potentially in play with personnel at this stage, but everything we've talked about, you know, it's hard to say exactly what is going to occur with these players, but I think it's fair to say that all of those things are conceivable.
We await word on a potential trade maybe that the 76ers were involved in. And we have another maybe second-round pick that could wind up somewhere. So why don't we go to this, a local product out of Friends Central and Duke. Amile Jefferson, just a terrific guy to sit down with. One of the really longest tenures in Duke history, and he had a lot of success, part of a national championship run. So here was the pre-draft workout interview with Amile Jefferson earlier this week. A man with deep roots in the Delaware Valley out of Friends Central and Duke, Amile Jefferson. Amile, this is your final one out of 14 workouts. How cool was it to be back in your hometown and wrap it up all up here?
It was amazing. You know, it was a great opportunity, you know, to come in this morning and work out for the team, you know, that I grew up idolizing, loving, watching, embracing. So to be here today, you know, was nothing short of incredible. Really honored and glad that I had, you know, the chance to do this.
What did you feel best about the workout that you had?
Yeah, I thought I competed really well. Was able to get to the rim. You know, we won some games, which is always good. And then I thought, you know, bringing energy, communication to the workout really uplifts it. So, you know, I try to do that in every workout I'm in, and I thought this one went great.
After multiple weeks and 14 workouts, how does the body feel? How does the mind feel after going through such a grinding period?
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes, you know, you go through that slump where you get tired, like in the airport, you're sitting there for 4, 5, 6 hours. But I came in from San Antonio last night, and I was super excited to get here. It gave me, like, you know, a second wave of energy. Didn't really sleep much last night, just so excited. But I feel great, you know, working out, you know, for the Sixers has been, you know, a dream of mine. You know, to be able to put on this uniform is, you know, incredible. So right now, I'm on a high. My body feels great, and I was just super pumped and excited to have the chance to work out today.
National champion at Duke, all-time leader in games played, 3-year captain. What are you most proud of about the experience you had the last 5 years?
I think the relationships, I've made and was able to build at Duke, lifelong friendships, whether it be with, Jalil, who's here, or, Quinn Cook, Coach Shire, and Coach K, people that, I talk to, all the time, in constant communication with them, even though, I've graduated. And I think that's the biggest thing, being all in, be a part of something that's bigger than yourself, and then, building a lifelong bond with people that you truly love.
Skill development-wise, where do you think you made the most progress?
I think definitely just being an all-around player, being able to handle the ball, pass the ball, make reads. I think my IQ definitely increased, being able to read the game on the defensive end, being able to control, a defense, from the middle as a leader, and being the voice of a team. I think I rebound at a high level, and that just kept increasing at Duke. But the biggest thing is what does it mean to be a leader on and off the court?
Favorite Philadelphia-related basketball moment, either that you were a part of or that you remember watching growing up?
It would definitely be, Allen Iverson, Game 1 versus the Lakers. Specific moment, when he hits the shot, steps over to Lou. That's like an iconic, Philly moment. I can remember, the Sixers, will win a series, whether it be versus Milwaukee or Boston. You come outside, you bang your pots, and you would hear it from 2, 3, 4 blocks away. So that time in the city was incredible. I think everyone, embraced Allen Iverson. And young guys like me growing up, we all thought he was born and raised in Philadelphia. You couldn't tell us any different. So that was truly a special moment. And then personally for me, just being at Friend Central, winning 4 state championships in 4 years, that school is amazing. And it gave me a great foundation. It's a big part of my life and my heart.
You're going to be local. How are you going to spend draft night?
I'm going to be home, with family, on the phone with my agent, seeing, what happens. And hopefully, I can land somewhere and grow, with a group and bring professionalism and be a part of this amazing league.
Well put, Amile. Best of luck.
Thank you.
'76ers training complex hosting its first draft after opening this past fall. Thank you for hanging out with us as we creep towards a new day, I guess you could say, in the literal and figurative senses both. 76ers taking Markelle Fultz, number 1 overall, Jonah Bolden, number 36, and Juwan Evans, number 39. We do have a trade that has been announced and confirmed. 76ers pick up from the Orlando Magic the 25th overall pick, Andris Pašeknieks from Latvia. And he's a guy who's a big man. He tried to help Latvia into the Olympics this past summer in the Olympic qualifying tournament. And this a potential, who knows ultimately what will become of it, but he is a guy who probably of all the projected international prospects in this year's draft had the most experience.
Well, according to Fran Fraschilla, as we kind of eavesdropped a little bit on the coverage of the draft by ESPN, I believe he said he played with Porzingis in Spain. And so he sounds like a very talented player. But again, you have to defer to the Sixers in terms of, their overseas scouting. And again, Bryan Colangelo has a deep history with watching the international game and players over there. And it was for what we believe is a first-round pick down the road.
Right. There's some protections in place potentially in 2021. Frightening that we're even talking about a range.
20, I think.
Yes, 20. I'm sorry, 2020. Yes, that is correct. So he's a guy that got into some reps last year in the ACB, which is, let's see, after now the G League, that might be considered the 3rd best league on the good old planet. So Pašeknieks, someone that we will find out a little bit more about in the coming days as far as whether or not he may be joining the Sixers.
Big guy too, right? What's he listed at? 6'11", 6'10"?
Yes, he is tall. He is Let me go to the cheat sheet from the Sixers.com prospect profiles. He's in his early 20s. He was one of the more experienced. Now he's 7'1", 220 pounds, and he averaged around 16 minutes per game. One of the things that we have yet to see is a player whom the Sixers worked out with the exception of Markelle Fultz, of course, but from the group workouts, be a pick. And the Sixers right now, they are on the clock once again. Pick number 45 was Dylan Brooks to the Houston Rockets out of Oregon, who we had the chance to sit down with last week from Nick Stauskas' hometown of Mississauga in Ontario. But the Sixers, they had some workouts come in just this past week, and wonder if maybe we might get to see someone from a workout group pop up as a pick for the 76ers. So we'll know that in just a matter of seconds. And then after pick number 46, it'll be 50, and then presumably I think we might hear from Bryan Colangelo. Curious if he'll wait until just the end of the second round.
One of the things with workouts too, it's not just things that you're verifying in a positive realm. There might be things like, you know what, not so much on this guy. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure it works both ways, where a guy comes in and something maybe you expected, and then you watch him work out, and you're like, I'm not a big fan anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got human nature being what it is. You probably not everything's check, check, check. You know, some things might be, I didn't like what I saw to that guy. So who's to say? And I'm speaking more in a general sense.
All right, here we go. Sterling Brown, number 46. For the Sixers. Here's a guy that you can maybe talk a little bit more about, maybe because he was recently here for a workout on Monday. Sterling Brown out of SMU, Shannon Brown, his younger brother, former champion with the Los Angeles Lakers.
Right. Boy, Southern Methodist is really starting to put some players, going back to the Larry Brown years in Dallas, but some of their players are getting picked and getting a lot of recognition.
And that's something that he talked about, did Sterling Brown, in the conversation that we had with him earlier this week, that, you know, Larry Brown, you're a college freshman, you come in and
doesn't play rookies.
That's right. And you get to learn from Larry Brown, you get to relearn the game. You spent so much time with.
No, right. No, one of the great basketball coaches in the history of the game, and yeah, no, that would be a tremendous learning. He would have an education on and off the floor in terms of his college experience, to be sure.
Sterling Brown, 4 years at SMU, seemed to get better and better each season. I know that I think we did a one-on-one with Sterling earlier this week, so maybe that is something that we can look for in the queue and bring that to you if you did not check it out on Sixers.com. But here's a 4-year veteran guy, and he was someone who, if I'm remembering his paraphrase correctly, just felt like he could do a little bit of everything, be well-rounded, and much like a lot of these guys who spent 4 years in college, they feel like one of their biggest calling cards is just being fundamentally sound and being able to come right in and, you know, physically be able to handle things, but also from the mental standpoint.
And that's great, and those are really good basketball players, no doubt. And again, I'm not speaking specifically to Brown, but, you know, NBA coaches, NBA personnel people, they look for a definable NBA skill. You're a shooter, you're a rebounder, and obviously you have to be as well-rounded as possible and not have any gaping holes in your game. But you know, you got to be able to do something where you can depend on that aspect of your game in order to create a niche and to have a skill that's NBA ready. And there's winning players that can contribute in a multitude of ways. But I think in the end, you really have to be something, whether it's a passer, a defender, a scorer. You know, being a great screener is great, very integral in terms of helping out. But you need to have a little bit more than just, you know, being good at everything. Everybody's good at this level.
So Sterling Brown, pick number 46 for the Sixers, third out of their 4 second-round selections, and comes from a pedigree, and that's always something that you take note of. And speaking with him the other day, he just seemed like someone who's very ready and focused to continue this path. He averaged right around 13.5 points per game last season, around 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists, and just a steady, solid guy who actually comes out of Proviso East High School in Chicago, not West, which is the school that produced Robert Covington.
Well, Proviso East has been a great high school. Michael Finley went there, Glenn Rivers went there, just west of Chicago in Maywood, Illinois. I mean, they, you know, literally I watched them growing up. They had tremendous teams for decades, and I think Doc Rivers would be considered their #1 player, if you will. But Michael Finley right behind him, he was on a team that produced a couple of the Sherrell Ford played with the Hawks. Was a 4. They were called the Three Amigos, if I'm not mistaken. They won the Illinois High School State Championship.
Really?
And as you mentioned, Cov is from there and went to Proviso West. So that's great with Sterling Brown. And now you're starting to see some of these, like South Carolina just had a player chosen.
Darius Thornwell,
yeah,
who was one of the
Final Four, and you're seeing some of these great college players from last season be rewarded with NBA recognition in round 2.
Denver Nuggets are up now at number 49, and something else that Brandon Williams, general manager of the Delaware 87ers and also the Sixers vice president of basketball administration, he talked about, and Mark Eversley, the vice president of player personnel as well, is that, you know, these guys don't, for picks at this level, they don't discount winning.
Absolutely.
Winning's very important. As we know, let's, I think we have it ready. Jonah Bolden, the #1 pick of the second round for the Sixers, out of Australia, then went to UCLA, and then went to the Adriatic League last year. I think we have some highlights of the man with quite the reach and a wingspan. As we give it a little, there we go. All right.
Got hops too.
Yeah.
He sells.
Some cleanup duty.
Little throwdown. Little 3-on-1 action.
And that's Megalex right there, the team in
they
the...
need to get back in defensive transition with those bright neon yellow jerseys. Are you kidding me?
Sixers worked out a player from Megalex the other day, Alpha Kappa. All right, so...
Holy smokes.
In just the very cursory preliminary look, Jonah Bolden, you can see, is a man that can finish at the rim.
I say he could take it to the rack.
Yes.
Right. Wow.
Look at this.
Right.
Okay. And yeah, you can see, I mean, the length that people were talking about with him.
Jeepers.
Yeah, you might think defense in either the NBA or the G League might be a little bit different than what we are seeing here, but you know, you're looking for tools. You're looking for...
Right, looks like an incredible athlete.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not giving up on loose balls by the rim. So this is Jonah Bolden, who the Sixers took with their first pick in the second round at number 36. And the Sixers are up right now. The Denver Nuggets just made the pick at 49 of Vlatko Kankar out of Slovenia. Shame. Our director of digital media and content, Charlie Widows, he's a really good guy in general, but he also is, I don't want to say unhealthy, but he really gets into the international circuit, you know, so I know that he always has opinions and thoughts on this portion of the draft. Really, internationally speaking, Frank Ntilikina to the Knicks, that was about as high of a noteworthy prospect coming out of the international realm as we've seen. I mean, Terrence Ferguson played in Australia, but he's from the United States, so I don't know if you can truly...
You're right. I mean, based on recent draft history, some of those international players went really high early, and this year, and that's another player that was projected to go to New York, and all the mock drafts had that spot on.
So now we await pick number 50 in the draft for the Sixers, and will they stay domestic? Will they go back overseas? Once again, we really implore you, if you're going to check out some Sixers content, go to soundcloud.com/Sixers or check out the Sixers Podcast Network iTunes page, and the episode we did with Emmett Ryan from Ball in Europe, he mentioned Jonah Bolden, said he might be a sleeper type steal pick in the second round, and we know the Sixers have been really efforting the international circuit, and who knows, maybe that's where they go again with pick number 50, which could be their final pick of the night. Kind of like the way this second round moves, Mr. McGinnis.
A little quicker pace, that's for sure. They sound like they're about to announce it as they discuss the Sixers on the broadcast. Do a little eavesdropping here.
As Bryan Colangelo sounds like he'll speak not too long after pick number 50, and last year, if I'm not mistaken, the Sixers had at one point as many as 7 international players on their roster, and that was tied with the always internationally flavored Utah Jazz for really most in the NBA.
Spurs.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Some of these times here in June, we're looking down on the court, and you're like, whoa, that's Croatia, Cameroon, France, Canada.
Right.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and
Australia.
To think that just the previous season, aside from Stauskas, don't think there was another player who was an active member of the Sixers roster who had hailed from outside North America. Could be wrong on that as the Sixers get ready to make pick number 50. So it seems like they got a college veteran so far in Sterling Brown, with pick number 46, Jonah Bolden, who people seem like there's some promise about with him at number 36.
Just seeing those highlights, I concur.
Yeah, that opens up your eyes, even at this late hour of a Thursday evening as we get ready to cross over into Friday. And then there was also Juwan Evans, who for the time being remains property of the 76ers, the former point guard out of Oklahoma State. And we are standing by for the word at number 50. Sixers were active. They also picked up an acquisition at number 25 in the first round, Anžas Pasekniks. And we are hearing some more about some developing trades. So now, yes, and Josh Hart, a part of that. So Josh Hart, who worked out for the Jazz, now going to Utah. Here we go. Matthias Lesort, another international prospect for the 76ers. So out of France, he played in the A division, the top division there, which we know is gotten some really good talent in past years. Tony Parker, Nicolas Batum, Evan Fournier, if I'm not mistaken. So
good players
Matthias
all.
Lesort.
Wow.
He's Euro Cup champion in 2017, and he was the 6th man of the year in the French League, co-6th man of the year in 2016. He's got some pedigree. His brother plays professional hoops, and there's a little bit of a thumbnail sketch on Matthias Lesort. He was also mentioned on that podcast. Don't want to pump the podcast too much, but he was mentioned there. But that's, I mean, I feel like the focus on the international game has grown so much. France is a proven hotbed. So the Sixers make quick work of their 4 second-round picks, and at least at this point in time, did not end up trading any, selling any off.
How old is this young man, do you know?
He is 21 years old. So again, a little bit more veteran of a guy. He's a forward center from what we can gather. And I don't know, I'm kind of excited to hear Bryan Colangelo and what he says about the Sixers' efforts overseas.
Well, no doubt they get some talent, and how soon and when they play for the Sixers is something I'm sure Bryan will be able to add some clarity to. But as we said, there's only so many roster spots. But you're apparently you're adding some very talented players to the mix, that's for sure.
And for Lesort, he is someone that has represented France in years past in international competitions overseas. And just another guy who the Sixers can maybe throw into that front court mix. But again, this is an opportunity to see maybe you get someone in for Summer League. And the other thing is, it's like, you know, we're saying, oh, it's 12 midnight and this has been a long night for us. I mean, if not even before now, you would expect that members of the Sixers front office have been on the horn, potentially lining up some players or prospects who have a good sense that they are not going to be drafted. And the Sixers next week, if I'm not mistaken, starting on June the 28th, and then if you're not going, of course, to the Rashawn Holmes basketball camp, June 28th is going to be the first day, I think, of Sixers Summer League camp. So they need some bodies in for that. Not everyone who plays in Summer League camp will ultimately be taken out to Salt Lake City and Vegas. So now, Tom, we can start to think about that, which is going to be so exciting. It's going to be awesome to have you out there in Las Vegas this year. And you think about some of the teams. Think about in Salt Lake City and in Vegas, the Sixers are scheduled to play the Boston Celtics twice. They might see Josh Hart going up against the Utah Jazz now that he's been traded from the Lakers.
Oh, he went from, I thought he went from Utah to the Lakers.
I might be wrong.
Okay.
Could be wrong, but I'll have to go back and fact check that. But yeah, so there's, even in Salt Lake City, which only has 4 teams. I'll tell you,
the Samsung NBA Summer League in Las Vegas has gotten so big. You know what I mean? Not to mention, like, how many teams are there? 20-some?
I think it's 24.
24 teams. And it's, the whole league is out there at that time because there's NBA meetings with, you know, multiple departments from every team. All the basketball players, their players go that are, you know, veteran players go. In years past, Team USA would begin practicing there. It's pretty neat. And then some of those games, like we mentioned earlier, the game last year with Ben and the Sixers taking on Ingram and the Lakers. The year before that, it was D'Angelo Russell and the Lakers against Jahlil Okafor and the Sixers. And you know, the Thomas and Mack Center like fills up.
It's like a 17,000, 18,000 seat arena.
It's really neat. And you got people walking around. It's 105 degrees out. You get people walking around in shorts and T-shirts and flip-flops that are watching multiple games. You know, it's almost like going to baseball spring training, but you're just in one site, and all these teams play one right after the other. It's pretty neat. I mean, if you're a basketball fan in the summer, that is a pretty good option, that's for sure.
So Matthias Lesort, pick number 50 for the Sixers. As you now begin to step back from tonight, await Bryan Colangelo and think of what the Sixers accomplished. I mean, listen, it was after the Sixers got to number 1, you had the sense this was not going to be anything really short of great, exciting night regardless.
That's the big takeaway. You know, that really is, and that they added a marquee talent, a player in Fultz that has an opportunity to be a great young player. And, you know, they identified him, as Bryan Colangelo stated. You know, Mark Eversley saw him well over a year ago when he finished up his college or his high school play at DeMatha, and it's neat. I mean, he was singled out also as the far and away the #1 pick, and I think that was a consensus across the board. Just everything you've read and heard and watched, if you will, from the NBA draft analysis, he was far and away, and the Sixers, I think, are really pleased to be able to, I mean, you know, they're elated to add him to the mix with everything that he brings to the table skill set wise, and as a player, as a person as well.
One other thing about Lesort and Bolden as well, I mean, these are guys that were pretty much active members of their foreign teams last year, averaging a little bit over 20 minutes per game-ish. And, you know, over there, that's, you know, the guys that log major minutes. It's not like NBA 38 to, you know, sometimes 40 or 36-minute guys or anything like that. But, yeah, I think that you step back and you think about some major takeaways from tonight. No doubt it was the Sixers feeling like there was one singular prospect in this draft that was the ideal fit on all fronts, and to their credit, with everything that had been stored up in recent years, they went after him. They were aggressive, but they didn't mortgage the future.
Right.
And then in the second round, one of the storylines is some experienced guys in their 20s, early 20s, and also not afraid to trust on the efforts they've made overseas and their international scouting efforts.
No, I think you hit it right on the head. And, you know, you're looking both with your assets in terms of draft picks, the selections, I don't mean the players, you're trying to build for now and the future, and acquiring players, you're looking for now and then to add players into your basketball pipeline, if you will, down the road. And I think sometimes with the second round picks in the international game particularly, that those players may come over down the road, and now you're just adding to your talent base. Going forward, you allow a player to grow and mature and play and grow their games until they eventually come over and play and join the Sixers.
One guy who I kind of thought was going to go earlier in tonight's draft, at least when you look at some of the second round picks, was Ike Enibogu from UCLA. He was someone who didn't play a ton of minutes and didn't have the most active role, but for a while there around the combine, I think that he was mid-first round. And I mean, it is almost one of those situations where it's like once you get outside the top 10, I feel like, you know, the projections, they certainly help, you know, from this standpoint. You know, you don't really get to be as well versed in all college players, you know, some of the marquee names you do when the NBA season is in action, but you know, just seeing, you know, how teams shift the focus from, you know, when does it become more of like a best available player type thing towards the type of fit. We did clear up the Josh Hart thing. He is going to the Utah Jazz, so that was a trade from the Lakers to the Jazz. But he's someone that you gotta feel good for. You wonder if a guy like Chris Jenkins is going to end up anywhere on a summer league roster. And I think one of the fun things about this whole process is that, given where the Sixers have been in the last few years, you get to learn a little bit about some of these guys, and then you get to track and see where they ultimately go and how things pan out, whether that's in the first round or the second.
Right, well, that's what I said earlier too, is I think the NBA does a tremendous job in, as you get a look at the list there, that the Sixers, for now, with those 6 players added, as we said, to the mix. But you, to your point, you get you know, you get to learn about these players. It reminds me of like when you watch the Olympics and you're watching sports that you really don't pay a lot of attention. For example, swimming. And during the summer games, we really watch a lot of swimming. But they give you a profile of an athlete, and then that athlete goes out in a race, and all of a sudden you become more aware of their background and like that, and you begin rooting for them. But it's very similar in the NBA. The NBA, they make these young players available, the ones that are projected to be the high draft picks, and it's like before they start their rookie year, we already have a very good grasp of their backgrounds and the name recognition and so many elements of individual players that they become part of you know, the larger NBA, and they already have, you know, fans, and we know about them, and do you know what I mean? And I think Fultz, when was it, 2 years ago, did you know anything about Markelle Fultz, or 12 months ago? And now we obviously know quite a bit about him and are very excited about him coming in. That's what I'm talking about with, like you said, getting to know these guys and becoming aware of them.
For the Sixers, you start to think about maybe some of the names, and this is 100% pure speculation, about who they might bring to Summer League. You know, guys like Rashawn Holmes, T.J. McConnell might be now past the point of playing in Summer League. You never know.
Think so.
They may show up for a game or two. You know, we saw that last year.
That happens. But they've also established themselves as legitimate NBA players, contributors, and when they play. Now, oftentimes they want to be around the team and they're with the team. As you say, you allow them, you know, to get out there and play. But you're also, you know, even in Summer League, you're kind of taken away from the basketball staff, the coaches, the front office, an opportunity to see a player that you really, you want to see how they fare against the NBA competition. So, you know, I think after your second year, you can pretty much, you know what you've got in your own players. So it happens, but not very readily.
We would maybe like to see a guy like a Timothé Luau-Cabarrot. Who knows? Maybe he plays a bit in the summer league out there, to be determined. We're just spitballing at this stage of the night. Well, the night began pretty quickly and swiftly for the Sixers as they had the first overall pick for the 4th time in franchise history. In '73, there was Doug Collins. In '96, there was Allen Iverson. In 2016, Ben Simmons. And now on this night in 2017, there was Markelle Fultz, and he was here at the training complex 5 days ago on Saturday working out for the Sixers after it seemed like maybe the Sixers would have vaulted in position to take him, and we had the opportunity to speak briefly with Fultz. So as we await Bryan Colangelo, we will run back our chat with Markelle Fultz. Catching up with Markelle Fultz following his workout with the 76ers on Saturday, June 17th. Markelle, how'd it go?
It was great. I mean, any chance I get a chance to step on the basketball court, I love it. And I got to put in some work straight off the car, so today was a good day.
Well, what was the day like? I mean, you come up here, the fans chanting your name as you're walking into the facility. What type of emotions did that stir inside of you?
Just pretty crazy, just showing if I had a chance to come here, how invested the fans are, and just shows the city how much love they have for their players and everything like that. So I'm just blessed to come here and get this opportunity.
What did you learn about this business, just how much can change in the span of 24 hours?
Yeah, it's quick. I mean, as you can see, everybody coming to players came in here to watch me work out and stuff like that. It just shows our community, how they're together in a family-oriented program.
After the workout, we saw you get to meet up with Joel Embiid, Robert Covington, Ben Simmons. Do you have much of a relationship with those guys? What do you know about them?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I've been in contact with them since I was in college, really. Just talking about motivating me for college and just giving me little pointers to help me out throughout my career. And just me wishing me good luck as they were going on throughout the season and stuff like that. So,
all right. In terms of on-the-court stuff, what type of dynamic, what type of abilities do you think you'd be able to bring to a team?
I think, first of all, I bring a winning mentality, just coming in, giving it my all every day. Then a playmaker ability just to get other people involved and score the ball from all 3 levels. And then also on the defensive end, just going after it, going to block shots, rebounding, just pretty much doing whatever they need me to do to win. So.
Off the court, what type of guy are you? What would they be able to expect behind the scenes?
Yeah, definitely, you won't have to worry about me getting in trouble. I'm a humble young man. You're going to see me giving back to the young kids. I'm big on giving back and everything like that. So, I mean, I just want to give back to the community and just make everybody else feel better about themselves.
You've been looking forward to the draft for a long time. It's just a few days away. What's your level of excitement? What are your hopes for that night? What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, that night's going to be a memorable night. One of the probably my best day of my life. I've just been looking for this day all my life. I've been dreaming about it, and just to have that day come, and I'm gonna be able to take care of my family forever. So that's the biggest part, and then to see where I'm going and to take my career to the next level. So.
Markelle, thanks so much. Best of luck.
Thank you.
There he was, Markelle Fultz, numero uno in 2017. As we take a look at the loyal media throng still in attendance, Bryan Colangelo, we expect to hear from shortly as we move into our, this is it, this is our second day of coverage on Sixers Draft Live. Tom McGinnis, who would have thunk? Who would have thunk?
Right. Funny.
There's the podium where Bryan will be sitting, and here we are. We thank you for hanging out with us. If there are still some of you out there, very much appreciated. A very exciting night as the Sixers take Markelle Fultz first overall. They make a trade for Anzis Pesekniks, the 25th overall pick. So for a second straight year, the Sixers with multiple picks out of the first round. And you know, at this stage, you might be like, well, who's this Pesekniks guy? And maybe I might not even be saying his name correctly. I think so, but maybe not. And then you go back to last year, you're like, oh, the number 24 overall pick was Timothé Luau-Cabarrot, who people now feel very good about. And number 26 was Furkan Korkmaz, who had a terrific year overseas. So in that wheelhouse, you can definitely get talent. And then in the second round, the Sixers kept all four of their picks. Jonah Bolden out of Australia, UCLA into the Adriatic League, and then Juwan Evans from Oklahoma State, Sterling Brown from SMU, and the final pick for the 76ers was Matthias Lesorte, a big man out of France. It's interesting when you talk about how the Sixers have been able to make inroads overseas. Marin Sedlacek is one of the international scouts for the Sixers over there. He has coached some of in the Nike Hoop Summit world teams. So, yeah, it's always helpful to have a guy like that in the front office who, even if he doesn't see everyone, he may have people who has eyes on him, as you said earlier.
Oh yeah, no, it's an integral part of the game anymore to have an international scout. Back in the day, you know, you hear stories about like Jerry Krause in a gym looking around to see if he was the only one, and now I'm sure those guys sit in some rickety bleachers and they're all there, you know what I mean? So at least every team is represented. So no, I'm sure these are great young players. We'll learn more about them, hopefully get a chance to see them at some point in the near future. And no doubt the Sixers have added some value in terms of those players at those spots in this NBA draft.
And the expectation is that tomorrow at some point in time, the Sixers will be formally introducing their draft picks. Markelle Fultz, he obviously was up in New York, and perhaps some other guys that maybe are over here stateside might be able to get to Camden. As the Sixers add 5 players, make it 6 actually when you factor in Pesekniks as well, in the 2017 draft class. Just kind of scanning some things as we have now reached the 60th pick. The Hawks are on the clock. Nigel Williams-Goss, for you NCAA fans out there, he was taken 55th.
The Gonzaga player?
Yep, by the Utah Jazz. So staying in that pack. Well, that's not really the Pacific Northwest.
That's where
the mountainous
Stockton
area.
went?
That's right. Yes, indeed. I think he was present.
Senior? No way.
He transferred.
You know, one thing, he probably shouldn't have taken that last shot.
That's oof.
No, he just didn't have any lift.
No, he didn't.
Like,
you could see it.
He sprained his ankle like 3 plays before. And Kennedy Meeks comes over. Sports Illustrated, that tremendous photo where Meeks is just all ball. That was the game, you know. And it's tough because, you know, again, maybe not just this, but when a player's done so much for your team and for your program, and he wants the ball, he just didn't have the capability physically, and seemed like a great player, but certainly in that final segment of that NCAA championship game, didn't have the lift to be able to get that shot off, and North Carolina snuffed it out and won the game.
Drawn Blossomgame, who worked out for the Sixers not just this year but last, taken at number 59 by the San Antonio Spurs, and the Atlanta Hawks are last up. You think, where do you think we might be able to, this is like, let's see how far ahead we can get. Where do you think we might be able to see Markelle Fultz's, or what skill maybe do you think we might be able to see manifest itself earliest?
Well, one thing that struck me when I first saw his highlights And again, not really focusing during the course of the NBA season on the Pac-12 schedule and Washington's games, but he seems as though he glides. I mean, he really looks athletic out there, like the way he gets up and down. You know, one thing scouts look at is, you know, how a player runs. And he just seems like he can get to any place he wants to get to on the court and gets to the rim easily. I think it was sneaky athleticism with some of those dunks that he gets. And again, has an ability, just to watching some of his highlights, to get shots off and be able to create space to lift and fade away a little bit. And very, you know, very ball friendly, moves the ball and is able to play at a quick tempo, all things that the Sixers, that plays right into how they want to play with the pace and the space and the defense.
It was brought up in Brett Brown's press conference, well, where do you think Fultz might be from a defensive standpoint? We saw the chase down blocks, and he spoke on Saturday about his willingness on that end, but that's something that Brett Brown said, you know, it sounded like he was pretty confident in the coaching staff infrastructure here to help that along, and he seemed like Fultz came off like a coachable kid.
Well, let's face it, with these top players, they mostly make their names as offensive players. You know, they've been the star of their team at every level, and they have the athleticism. This is what I've always felt. They have the athleticism, you know, that foot quickness and that ability to get up off the floor, those types of things, that hand-eye coordination, all of those things lend themselves to being a good defender. But a lot of defense, and again, this is more of a general comment, but is the want, is the desire, is the effort. And you know, the Sixers have a tremendous defensive coach in Lloyd Pierce. In fact, Brian, Lloyd Pierce played defense against one of the top picks that came in here, and Lloyd Pierce was like Gary Payton.
It was impressive.
Right?
It was really impressive. Well, you did the interview with him. What does he say? What's his weight and what does he want to be? He's like so focused on, he wants to be at 200, but
he's locked in.
Yeah.
He's a stud. He's a really good coach, and that's what I'm saying. You know, when you come to this level, is, you know, as Coach Brown talked about with Dario Saric last year, it's a whole new jargon. You're learning the game at a really high level, and you know, you have to learn all of the terminology, and it's, you know, it's how to guard pick and roll, but the phrases that come with it, and all of those things, and you have to do it so much where it just becomes second nature. So it's an adjustment. But I think, you know, that's part of the reason they talk to these guys, is to find out what their coachability is and the like.
The final pick is in of this year's draft. Alpha Kaba, who the Sixers worked out the other day out of France. So the draft is officially at this point in time in the books. Sixers, they did pick up a second acquisition in the first round at number 25 via trade with the Orlando Magic, Andris Pesekniks, and it's 12:23 in the East on a Friday morning. If this is the time of day that you like your Pesekniks highlights, well, you're in luck, because here we have some. Yes, a little bit of quietude has settled in here in Camden at the Sixers training complex as we take a look at tonight's acquisitions in the 2017 draft for the Sixers. Not a bad looking board, but of course, how could it be when you have Markelle Fultz at the top? We are standing by for Bryan Colangelo, his last media address recapping the draft. We got some quotes, Tom McGinnis, from Jonah Bolden, the Sixers' first pick of the second round, a guy with some very intriguing length we saw could finish, much like Paseknik's in that sequence of highlights. And Bolden was asked by the media in New York City what prompted his decision to leave UCLA after his second year and go abroad to play. He said at the time, I just felt like it was not really something that he was satisfied with, and he wasn't ready. He knew he could do more to prepare himself best for the NBA, for where he's at right now, and he said he just felt like he needed to work on a few more things, work on a lot more of his weaknesses, and he felt like he was able to do just that in the span of 12 months.
Well, you know, as we found with certain players, you know, going professional and being able to focus strictly on enhancing and growing your game has been beneficial for a young player. And I don't know the situation or circumstances around his transferring other than to, you know, weigh in a little bit on that right there. But we've seen it in years past with, for example, Brandon Jennings, who played professionally in Europe. We saw with Moutier, right, who played overseas in China, if I'm not mistaken, before being taken in the NBA draft by the Nuggets. So, you know, there's certainly something to be said for, you know, somebody that wants to do that instead of going, you know, well, the one and done route. I realize he went to UCLA, but everybody has their own motivations, and clearly it worked out for him in that he's now part of the NBA and part of the 76ers, having gone in the second round.
Starting to see some of the members of the brain trust for the 76ers that were up there in the boardroom during the draft filter out, emerge. This has been a lengthy marathon.
That's a big day.
Yeah,
you know, it's a big day for them. Certainly, you know, as fans, we look toward the draft lottery in, you know, certain respects when the season ended, and then today was a big day, and this is the culmination for them, putting in so much time and effort and being prepared for a number of scenarios. So, end of a long session in that regard.
For the Sixers, relying on that international talent bed once again, and yeah, I'll be curious. It'll be interesting to see what some of the topics are that Bryan Colangelo addresses in this press conference coming up. Might be more along the lines of giving a sense of A, closure on what was a very big draft, and maybe B, more thumbnail sketches on some of the international prospects and those the Sixers took in the second round. Pretty much, you would think, exhausted many of the comments about Markelle Fultz in his first address. Brett Brown did as well. Really the first time we've heard Brett speak in about 2 months since the end of the season. It's very much, both of them, not only does it seem like there's a very genuine alignment between the two of them, but there's a nice respect where in season you kind of see Bryan Colangelo back off at times, and he knows that that's Brett Brown's time of year in terms of matters taking place on the court. And then this time of year, Brett's like,
that's what Bryan said. I remember at the end of the season, like, you're going to be hearing more from myself, and then, you know, after a lot of these workouts, we were able to hear from Brandon Williams and from Mark Eversley, and these guys have great knowledge and, you know, are really able to share quite a bit with you know, the workouts and all the personnel that they've been reviewing, and it's just, there's so many layers at this stage to a successful NBA franchise. We mentioned the analytics. You know, those guys are in there, and there's quite a staff now. The front office, we've heard so much about the sports science, which, you know, we're here in these areas around the weight room and the athletic training area. And there's just so many elements, and it's the Sixers, but really it's every NBA team, and I think it's, well, obviously across the board in many sports, and those are the types of things that, you know, once you make these advances, they're here to stay.
Sixers make a big haul in the draft tonight, led by Markelle Fultz, #1. Who knows, maybe we see him in Summer League activity at some point. That will be sorted out most likely in the days ahead. Very important to note that contracts can start to be signed on July 1 for rookie picks. Right. So that a key date to keep in mind, but the Sixers' first game in Salt Lake City is not until Monday, July the 3rd. And
isn't that when the free agent signing period becomes
so I mean that's the other thing, like
segment, right?
Right. So much of this is there's excitement and there's anticipation about drafting Markelle Fultz, and there should be, in figuring how he's going to factor into the Sixers core. But I think it's important to note something that Bryan Colangelo said on Monday, reiterated again tonight, Brett Brown did as well, that you're still talking about a core that's made up of players who are all under 24 still, essentially, right, save for maybe a Robert Covington. Right, exactly, yes. So they're still going to need to learn how to play together, and what could very well dictate, to an extent, how much of a leap the Sixers are able to make is just whom is brought in next, and next is free agency.
Right. Well, based on what Coach said, and based on, I would anticipate what Bryan is thinking too, is that you're right. You need a veteran presence, somebody to help lead these guys, and it's not of absolute utmost importance, but it helps so much when that player can play. You know what I mean? Like over the years, you know, Elton Brand has played in that role. Jason Richardson was out for over a year, right?
Right, yeah, almost like 2 seasons, yeah.
But when he came back, he still showed that he had a little something left in the tank, because it means more to the players when you're not just sharing what you knew or preaching. You're like, oh man, he's still got game, and that guy can get right out there and help in so many ways. And you know, I think the Sixers realize the importance of a veteran presence and a player in that capacity, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's something that comes up down the line.
That was something that, you know, just talking about all that we've talked about here tonight, do you remember that, yeah, that was last year part of the Summer League experience too, that they were able to get some of their guys out there. And, you know, you heard Bryan Colangelo and Brett Brown talk really appreciatively about how many players have been here so far. And they really have constructed like a camp of sorts in these past few weeks. And that vibe maybe spills over to Las Vegas a bit, where they had a lot of players that were out there last year. And certainly a lot of momentum building up within this team. And to go back to the buzzword that I would venture to say was introduced by Tom McGinnis tonight, or the phrase "on the rise," that was then used, and maybe, who knows, maybe amidst other things, front office was watching the Sixers draft live stream tonight. Hopefully not.
Might have a little something else on the agenda.
That's right, yes. Okay. So we start to see some milling about.
This might be Bryan.
Yes,
here comes
we
Bryan.
Go. We are going to have Bryan Colangelo coming to the
weight room
podium, and for those of you still with us, you're probably saying, these guys have had enough of them. But now we are going to have, in just a matter of moments, we see him off stage. What is this, left? Or is that stage right?
It's to your right.
Right, to my right. Bryan Colangelo.
Borrowing a line from Mark Zumoff. He's in the weight room.
That's right. Yes.
All right. Bryan's walking to the podium, so we're going to take this portion of the press conference as we hear. Oh, hold on. Momentarily.
You know what? There's some smiles around. The body language is good. You can tell the Sixers feel
great night.
This was a really helpful and important night.
Let's listen in, right?
Are we ready? Flip the switch. Podium cam. Is it that time again?
Quiet in here. Again. Draft is concluded. Actually had to bring a couple pieces of paper here because got a scorecard to follow. Had a lot of activity tonight in many regards. Very pleased, of course, again, that we picked Markelle Fultz with the #1 selection. Probably addressed that to enough degree earlier that you're satisfied. Hopefully Brett added some commentary and flavor to that as well. With respect to the other picks that were made this evening, we did acquire the 25th pick in the draft from Orlando, and we traded away an asset that was previously acquired in the Jeremy Grant trade to OKC. So we traded away a protected first that is available as early as 2020. It was protected to 20, if you recall. A lot of details and complexity to the way it's structured, but again, it's a pick that, if it's conveyed, it will be 21 through 30. If it's not conveyed, it rolls to 2 seconds at some point in the future. And in addition, we gave to Orlando a future 2020 selection that is the least favorable of Brooklyn and the New York picks that we have possession of. At 36, we picked, with the 25th pick, we picked a player that we've scouted, fairly extensively overseas. I want to say his name very eloquently, and I will try to. It's late, but Andrzej Peseczniks is the best I can do. I'm going to work on that, I promise you. He's a talented 7'1", 7'2" center prospect, very athletic, very mobile, developing offensive game, but just a good young talent that we've identified as a future center prospect in the game. Very excited about that. At 36, we picked Jonah Bolden, player that initiated his collegiate career at UCLA, lasted 1 year, I believe, and ended up in Serbia playing professionally this year. Had a chance to see him also play this year, and was impressed with his ability to impact the game, both rebounding, defensively, and even scoring. His ability to step outside and shoot the three, very mobile, athletic, power forward type. 39 picked Jawan Evans from Oklahoma State, and just a really talented guard that some people thought would even go a little bit higher in this draft. 46, we picked Sterling Brown, who went to SMU, and had a chance to see him not only through some recent draft workouts, but here in our own building. We had a chance to come in and compete. Again, another guard prospect that brings a lot of aggression to the table. Just finds ways to score, finds ways to defend. He's a big, strong guard that we had interest in. And then at number 50, we picked Matthias Lasorte, who is playing professionally overseas at Nanterre, just outside of Paris. I believe he will be playing in Bamberg under a contract that will begin shortly. So going back real quickly, just to, again, keep score of everything, Jonah Bolden was playing for FMP in Belgrade. He now has signed a recent new contract with Red Star. That is a 2-year contract, I believe. So the European or international selections all will be players that will likely stay overseas. And I know there's some speculation that there's been some other activity with respect to our draft selections, but what we felt like we did was kind of systematically utilize the picks that we had available to us in the second round and the pick that we acquired to just bring in more value to this organization in more ways than one. So I'm going to leave that all kind of out there right now. I'll answer questions to try to address what I can specifically. But, you know, please feel free. And again, sorry for the late hour, but the draft just ended and we had a lot of activity. It was a little bit of a firestorm during the second round in particular, but go ahead.
At this point in time, and with the current makeup of the roster and the contracts that you have, why was it appealing for you to add 3 players that may probably not play in the NBA next season?
We look at our roster as, you know, moderately full. We've got a few roster spots that we think are open to addition by potentially free agents, maybe perhaps even some trade targets that we would talk about. You know, there's the unknown of whether or not Furkan Korkmaz may come over or may not. That's appearing more and more likely based on our own desires as much as his. We think it would be a good time for him to come, but we're working on that still. At the same time, you know, sometimes, especially an organization at the stage we are at in terms of building, you know, can only have so many young players. So you got to leave a few slots for some veteran players, veteran additions, and you know, the players in question are all subject to international contracts or contracts that would require buyouts. And perhaps there's even been some discussion with the representation or agents for those players that there's no intention to come over at this stage. So we feel pretty comfortable, you know, with the concept of, you know, draft and stash. It's labeled by most, but it's basically no different than taking an asset and doing something for future assets. So trading, say, a second-round pick for a future second-round pick. In this case, we're actually attaching a name to the selection and deferring their coming over to a later date. Yep, right.
In general, can you just speak to the value you place on scouting internationally in Europe, just generally how you feel like players from over there might be able to help and what you look for in that area?
Yes, we put a lot of focus and effort on that, but really it's a global game, and we're looking everywhere for the best talent. You know, Jonah in particular is Australian by birth, and you know, there's some connection there. Coach Brown is very familiar with the Bolden family, and I believe Jonah's father played with Ben Simmons' father. I've got to check all my facts in that regard, but Brett's very familiar with the family. And, you know, the league right now is over 25% foreign-born or international. And so it speaks to just how global the game is becoming. It means that, you know, we've got to work that much more at finding out, you know, where that talent is coming from, where it's been relocated to, and how it's developing. And so, you know, for example, the young player Pasechnik's playing in, I said it better that time, by the way, in Gran Canaria is, you know, playing his first year in Spain, and he's really developing at a much more rapid pace. Feel like sometimes you look at the league they play in, the team or club they play for. Sometimes, you know, that influences your thoughts. But we really do think that the players that we picked, you know, could in fact develop into NBA, bona fide NBA players, and we wouldn't have selected them otherwise. So we're excited about the addition of those players, and no different than Furkan, we're going to, you know, initiate contact and begin a relationship and you know, nurture that relationship and cultivate it to the point where you know, ultimately a decision will be made when they come over or if they come over, and you know, what value those picks have. But you know, we started the year with 0 second-round picks through a couple trades. We ended up with 4 second-round picks, and we felt the value of adding another first-round pick this year was enough to move forward and make that deal. Again, converting one asset into something a little bit deeper, we felt like it was the right thing to do.
What did you hope to accomplish in the draft tonight, and how would you assess how you did?
I don't necessarily want to give our team a grade. We're pleased with the outcome and results. I'll probably tune into a few websites tomorrow to see just exactly how we did, and then try to prove them wrong if it's a bad grade. But I think overall, I was proud of the effort put forth by everyone in the room, and I think that we were very well prepared for the draft, which was always something that you want to feel like walking out of there. You knew exactly what you hoped to accomplish, and I feel like we got a lot done today. So don't really have a grade to give, but we feel like we performed well tonight.
Bryan, can you talk about what happens with the 39-46 picks yet, or are you keeping them? Are you conveying them elsewhere?
Well, we've drafted a few players. We retain the rights to those players, and we'll see how the dust settles here in the coming weeks as to how this all plays out. We do own the draft rights to the 5 players that we picked tonight. 5 or 6? 6. I'm sorry. And we'll see how it all plays out. Thanks. Anybody else? You got something? Anybody? Okay. Again, thank you for your attendance tonight. Thanks for being patient and staying late. And we will see you soon, maybe as early as tomorrow morning, with an introduction of several of our young draftees. Okay. Thanks.
A tomorrow morning that is, in fact, today, because this is our second day of covering the draft here on Sixers Draft Live with Tom McGinnis, Brian Seltzer. One last look at the Sixers 6-man haul from June 22nd, 2017. This was fun. I mean, this was a maiden voyage into this foray of good old digi-content, but there was a lot to cover. There was a lot of activity, and all in all, I think based on body language, comments, you can tell that Bryan Colangelo feels like the Sixers made out pretty well tonight.
Absolutely, and that comment about how do you feel, and like to be prepared, it's like a coach. You go into a game, you want to be prepared for every scenario. You may not win the game, but you want to feel like you were ready and you're able to handle every situation, and that's, I think, and they won the game in that they got the #1 pick and they got some really good players in the second round, and they were prepared, they were ready, and Bryan leads a huge staff. He's put in a lot of time, and they came away with some great additions for the team both now and in the future.
For the Sixers, it is very soon going to be a time to get to work. Later on this Friday morning, maybe into the afternoon, we'll hear some more from the prospects the 76ers acquired tonight. Markelle Fultz, #1, 4th overall, #1 pick in franchise history. And I mean, this, in all seriousness, this is, first of all, if you watched, if you streamed for all of it, some of it, in and out, went about your night, came back, we really thank you for tuning in. This was something different. We realized that it was probably not, at all times, the smoothest. We did our best to effort things to you in the most straightforward and effective way that we could. So if there are any glitches or hiccups, we appreciate your patience. We also, Tom, had a phenomenal crew of half dozens, maybe a little bit more, helping us out tonight.
I want to thank Ryan Coletti.
Yes, our director.
Drew Braun, Chris Unera, Kirk Geisen, Charlie Widows, and Nick McCain were all in Barclays Center, but they helped out greatly leading up to the draft. Ryan Dister and Brian Adams, and of course Dave Scholler helped us a great deal in terms of helping to provide guests, and for all those guys that came on the program. We appreciate it. Brian did a great job. Thanks.
Thank Darrell Smith and Audrey Chavone as well from our digital department. I'm sure we're going to be seeing each other sooner rather than later. Yes, well, thank you so much for logging on. That's right, indeed. It is. It really does feel like it is here. We will talk to you at some point in time, but stay tuned to Sixers.com, all of our social channels, as coverage continues of the Sixers, now with Markelle Fultz in the fold. Good morning. See you.